Karete Pontes, welcome back to Greek. This week we're going to be focusing on forming the future indicative and infinitive forms for omega conjugation verbs, and then we're going to be looking at some stem changing rules, which I know sounds a little bit intimidating, but it'll all make sense very soon. It just has to do with forming future forms. And then last we're going to be looking at our fourth vocab set, and at the end of the lesson we'll be doing a brief teaser just like normal. And this week's teaser is on second declension nouns. So we're going to be looking at a sentence that has one second declension noun in it. And just so you're aware, so far we've only done first declension nouns. So you might know that, you might not. Either way, it's fine. All those different endings we learned, whether it's long alpha stem, long or short alpha stem, eta stem, or mixed stem, those are all still first declension nouns. So the second declension has a completely different set of endings, but don't worry, we'll be doing that next week, and this teaser is just to get you excited about it. So first, we're going to be looking at forming the indicative endings for future omega verbs. In its most basic sense, the future in Greek is formed by taking a sigma and then adding the present active endings. So, for the indicative, we're going to take a sigma and then add the present active indicative endings. So we have omega, sigma ace, sigma a, sigma amen, amen. Okay, sigma ete, sigma usi. And we have that removable nu on the end, just in case we run into a word following this verb that begins with a vowel. So, let's just go through these one more time and just speak them. We have so, ses, say, samen, sete, susi. And I know that these sound a little bit funky without a verb before them, but they'll sound more normal once we add actual verbs. And the infinitive works exactly the same way, so I didn't even write out a box for it. All you need to know, take the sigma and then add your infinitive ending, which we know is ein, epsilon iota nu, so you get sane. Same process as the indicative endings for future. Okay, but it's not quite that simple always. So we've already learned that to find the present stem of a verb, you're going to take off the ending, right? So akuo, we have that omega on the end. So once we take off that omega from akuo, we get aku, right? And so we've learned that that is our present stem. Now to form a future, based on the rules that we just learned, we would add a sigma and then the present active indicative endings again, right? Everything like normal. And yes, for this verb that is true, because if a stem ends in a vowel or a diphthong, you just go with the sigma, just like we learned. So the future of akuo would be akuso. Right? Accenting and everything works exactly the same way. But things get a little bit more tricky with verbs like fulato here. So we're going to follow the same path to find our present stem. We take off that omega, the ending, and we end up with fulat. So logically, based on what we've learned so far, you would have fulat, fulat, and then add a sigma and then an omega. So you get fulatso, right? But Greek does not work that way. And actually the way Greek works makes these words sound even nicer in the future. Because if the present stem of a verb ends in a consonant, you're going to have a double consonant or a phonetic change in the future. And I know that maybe you don't know what that means, but that's exactly what we're about to explain. So let's look at our stem changing rules. Now, it's totally okay if you don't know what these words mean, labial, palatal, and dental, but I find that they help me remember where I place the sounds in my mouth when I'm making these letter sounds, and then what follows as the letter we're going to use instead of a sigma. So, for example, let's look at labials. Labials are letters that you form using your lips in some way. So let's look at P. The P sound is formed by pushing air through your lips, right? When your lips are together. So you're using your lips to make the sound that the letter P makes. Same thing with beta, the B sound, same process. And with phi, you're still involving your lips in creating that sound. So labials, when combined with a sigma, are replaced by the psi. And this actually makes sense, right? Because if you think about the letter P, for example, if you took a P and say this was how our present stem ended, and then we added a sigma, just following our rules, we'd end up with the ps sound. But that's a little bit redundant because Greek already has a letter that makes that sound, and that's why we replace the P sigma with a psi, because it makes the same sound and you're just writing one letter instead of two. And so the same applies for beta and phi. Okay, so now let's take a look at palatals. Palatals are letters that you form the sound of from the back of your mouth. So the kappa, for example, you're creating the k sound towards the back of your mouth, right? And so that is the quintessential palatal, and same is true for gamma, you're making the g sound back of your mouth, and ki, whether you pronounce it as k or h or whatever, it's still the back of your mouth that's creating that sound. And so for all of these letters, you're going to replace the sigma and this letter with a xi. And this makes sense too, because you know how we looked at P, and once you added the sigma, you got the ps sound, and there's already a letter for that. Well, the same is true here. So let's look at kappa, because it's the most obvious example. So take a kappa, pretend that there's a verb before this, and then we're going to add a sigma because we want to form the future, and you get the x sound, right? Makes sense. But Greek already has a letter for that. Greek has xi, which makes the x sound exactly, which is just kappa sigma when put together. That is why xi is called a double consonant, because you're combining two different consonant sounds to create one letter. And that's why in Greek you want to go the simpler way. Why wouldn't you just write one letter instead of two that you would have to write here? So that's what I was saying, these rules might seem a little bit tricky or maybe even a little bit annoying at first, but once you get comfortable with them, they're actually really logical and also save space for you because you're writing one letter instead of two. So, like I said, all three of these letters act the same way and will be replaced by a xi. And an important thing to note is that with all of these rules, when I say that this is what you're replacing with, you're not keeping whatever letters over here and then adding this letter. So, for example, with akuo earlier, we just added the sigma and we got akuso, right? We didn't have to take away anything, we didn't have to replace anything. But with these words, when you form the future, you're both removing a letter and not adding a sigma, but replacing the letter plus sigma combination with an entirely different letter in the first place. I think this will make a lot more sense in practice. Another thing I just realized is that I wrote singular and plural up top here. Just ignore that. I did not mean to leave that there. So, next we're going to look at dentals. And these are letters that you form using your teeth. So we'll start with tau. Tau is formed, the t sound is formed by pressing your tongue against the back of your teeth, right? So you're using your teeth to form the sound. That's why it's called a dental. Same thing with delta, exact same process. You're just making a different sound. And then theta, same thing, you're involving your teeth to make the th sound. And these letters are replaced by a sigma. So think about any time that you end with a T. So let's look at klepto. This is actually a really interesting example. So klepto, right, we've looked at this word, it means to steal. Klepto. To find the present stem, we're going to take off that omega, right? So we'll take it off, just erase it. And then we're going to go through the normal process that we learned initially. We're add a sigma and then add our ending back. Well, now we have klepso. We've got 3 consonants there and it's not too nice. There are some things we can do, right? So based on this rule about dentals, when the tau combines with the sigma, we end up with just a sigma. So now we can replace this here, the tau sigma, with just a sigma. So now we have klepso, right? And so we would think that that would be the end of everything, but no, Greek is trying to simplify things for you, even when you think it is trickier or trying to make things more complicated. In reality, Greek is just trying to help you save some space and save some sound, right? Because you are trying to say this as fluidly as possible. So rather than writing p sigma, we're going to follow the rule that we learned here, right? With the p combining with the sigma to form a future for a different verb, if that's just the end of the present stem. If p is the end of the present stem and we add a sigma, we replace the p and sigma with psi. So here, we're going to do the same thing. So klepto, we get klep, and then we need to add something to replace the p and sigma, and that's just a psi, and then the omega. So you ended up doing this 2-step process to reach the future, but you finally got it, where now you're looking at klepso as the future of a word that was once klepto, and then klepso, and then klepso, and then klepso again. It sounds the same, but you've written one fewer letter than before. And I know that maybe I'm going a little bit fast through this, so make sure that you reach out with any questions you have. Remember, you can email me, president@fjcl.org, or DM at officialfjcl on Instagram, or even reach out through the Remind group. There are so many different ways to contact me. You are not alone in this, I promise. And I know that it can be tricky, so definitely reach out with any questions you have, or if you just want to explore something else because you find it interesting. Okay, so aside from these 3 categories, the labials, palatals, and dentals, we also have 2 other cases we want to look at. So first is words that end in pt, right? The p tau. And this is exactly what we were doing with klepto. I just went the long way through it so that we could see the process behind how we get here. But if you just want to know the shortcut, any present stem that ends in p tau and doesn't do anything weird in the future, which we'll address those later, the p tau sigma, technically, it's an invisible one there, will be replaced by a psi. And then for any verb that ends in tau tau, you're going to replace the tau tau with the invisible sigma with a xi. And so I drew these brackets here because in reality, you could group these together, write these rules. You could just learn that anything ending in p, beta, gamma, or p tau is going to use a psi in the future, just as an example. And you can say the same thing with palatals and tau tau. But I like to organize it this way because if you do understand that labials with your lip, palatals in the back of your mouth, and dentals by your teeth, then it can be easier to group and to actually understand why this happens, why you're choosing a letter to form the future, rather than just memorizing. Now we're going to be moving into some practice. First, we're going to be looking at paideo. So let's form our future. So we get paideo as our stem. Then we're going to add a sigma, and then the omega again. And we add our accent like normal. So now we know that paideuso is the future of paideo. And now it's smooth sailing through these examples. So paideuso. Here, I'm going to do this in black just for clarity. Okay. Paideuso, accent. Then paideuses. Paideuse. Paideusomen. Paideussete and paideu. Oh my goodness. Paideu. Oh my gosh. Why is this so difficult for me? See. And then we go back to here. Oh my gosh, I even messed that up. Okay, let's just start over with the third person plural. Let's go through every letter so that I don't mess this up. P, alpha, iota, delta, epsilon, upsilon, sigma, because we're using future, and then omicron, upsilon, sigma, iota, with the removable nu. And then we take our accent, put it on the ultima, and because our ultima is short, nothing is working. Okay, you know what? Because our ultima is short, we move back 2 syllables, so 1, 2, and we end up on that upsilon. Just a quick little accent review. All right, so paideuso, paideuses, paideusse, paideusomen, paideusete, paideususi. All right, now let's do our infinitive, and just like I said before, the infinitive works just like the indicative, where we take our stem, paideu, and then we're going to add a sigma, and our infinitive ending, which is ain. And so because we have a diphthong on the end here, we move back 1 syllable, we end up on that upsilon for our accent, and we get paideusein. Okay, so that's paideuo. This one is relatively simple because we just add the sigma, just like we would always hope to do. But with this next example, we have dioko. And dioko, when we look at the present stem, we take off that omega and we end up with dioke, right? And so now we need to add a sigma and our ending again, so we get diokso. But if you remember, when we looked at that chart, kappa, right? That's the end of our present stem. Kappa is made in the back of your mouth, so that is a palatal. And when we combine the k with the s of the sigma, we end up with the x sound. So what letter is that? Xi. So let's look at the chart one more time just to confirm that we understand what's happening. So we find the kappa. Kappa is under palatals. And so when we combine the k with the sigma, what I like to call the invisible sigma, then we're going to end up with a xi instead of the kappa sigma, right? Because the x sound of kappa sigma is the same as the x sound of just a xi. So we go back to our diokso, improperly written, and we erase the kappa sigma. We replace it with xi and add our ending. So here's diokso, and accenting works the same way, so we put it on our ultima and move it back one syllable because omega is long, and we get diokso as our future. And now it's smooth sailing again because we've figured out what the future is, and that's really the hardest part of this because the endings are the same. So, diokso, dioxase, dioxay, dioxamen, dioxete, dioxusi. And there we have it. That is it for dioko, for the indicative, and then for the infinitive, same thing. We take our present stem, diok, right? Add our sigma, and so we get diox, and now at this point we know what's going to happen. The kappa sigma is replaced by xc, and then we add the ain ending. Ain, diphthong is long, so our accent moves from our ultima back one syllable onto the omega. So we get dioxane. And those are our two practice examples we're going to do in the lesson this week, but I promise there are plenty more down below in this week's worksheet, so make sure to check that out after watching this video because, as usual, practice is the only way you're really going to get a good handle on this. So that's all for dioko. And now we're going to look at our vocab for this week and then do our teaser and we'll be done. So first, we have alato, which means to change. And now something you might be wondering is, why is this here, right? What is alaxo doing here? Well, we recognize alaxo as the future of alato, right? Because we've learned that tau tau is replaced with xi. So now you just learned the second principal part in Greek verbs. So you know how in Latin we'd have the first person singular present active indicative as the first principal part, and then the second principal part is the present active infinitive. Well, in Greek you have the future active indicative in the first person singular for our second principal part. So we get alato, alaxo. And those are the two principal parts we're going to have to know. And for all verbs now, you are going to start writing the first principal part and our newly learned second principal part. Now, there are going to be a couple words where our stem changing rules don't apply, and so there's this whole weird words that you might not recognize as future, but you'll just have to memorize them and then it'll all be okay, I promise. But for now, all you need to know is the second principal part is just going to be your first person singular future active indicative form. So let's just move on and go a little bit faster through the vocab. Alato, alaxo, change. Dioko, dioxo, which means to chase, banish, or hunt. Now this is a very interesting word. This is echo. Now, the future has two different forms you can use. It can either be hexo or scaso. This is an example of a word where you just have to memorize the future because it's a little bit funky. So, echo means to have or hold, but if you use the word with an infinitive form, you're going to be translating echo as to be able to. So to be able to infinitive, whatever that infinitive is. Now, the next word we're going to be looking at is another sort of funky one, but one I really like. It's mellow. And in the future, it's meleso, another form you just have to learn on its own. And melo's interesting because with a present infinitive, it means to delay or hesitate. So melo speldein means I hesitate to hasten. It's an interesting sentence. But so you see that when you're using a present infinitive, you're going to be translating melo as either delay or hesitate. But this is the only word we're going to be looking at where if it's used with a future infinitive, it means something entirely different. So melo with the future infinitive means to intend or be about to. So melo spelsein would be I intend to hasten, or I am about to hasten. So it's not about melo being future. Although melo could be future, you could say meleso, and then it will be like I will be about to whatever. But what's really important here is that the infinitive that follows whatever form of melo you're using is in fact a future infinitive, and then you can translate melo as intend or be about. Okay, I promise that's all for weird words this week. Next we have prato, which in the future is praxo, just following our normal rules, and it means to do. And then we have ago, in the future oxo, again following our rules, and this means to lead, bring, or pass time. That's all for verbs this week. That's all. There were quite a few verbs, but again, this vocab list is down below in the worksheet, along with all the practice that I mentioned, so it's always a good place to look when you need a reference or just want some extra practice to do. Okay, now let's look at some adverbs. These are also really interesting. So first we have eti, which just means still, yet, or longer. I like to think of this like et in Latin, just the word et. Used as an adverb, you may know this. Et, instead of being and when used like a conjunction, when it's used as an adverb, it can mean even, or still, or yet. So eti, used in Greek, means still, yet, or longer. So whenever you see eti, just know that it is in fact an adverb. Don't start thinking it's et, like in Latin, as a conjunction. Okay, an easy way to remember eti is actually other forms of it. So, meketi means no longer or no more. So you see meketi, and seems pretty simple, right? You just learn no longer. Okay, well, meketi is used in situations where may, which we learned either last week or a couple weeks ago, would be used. So with an imperative, with an infinitive, whatever form that you would normally use may with to mean not or no, now you're going to use meketi. Okay, so then it really follows and just totally makes sense that for a word in the indicative, you would use u-keti, right? Because we know that this keti ending at this point is related to eti and means longer, and me or u means not or no. So when you take no and add it to longer, it's no longer. But what's important to remember is that meketi is used where may would be used. So with imperative, infinitive, anything that's not the indicative. And u-keti is used where u would be used, so with the indicative. And they mean exactly the same thing. It's just important to know which one to use and when. Eti can be used with whatever though. And then the last adverb is palin, which means back or backwards or again. All right, and then the last thing we're going to look at is one conjunction. This is ala, and it means but. Or al, if the next word that follows this word begins with a vowel. And we're actually going to see that in our teaser. So here we are. Here's our one sentence with a second declension noun. So let's read it first. alaxes ton adelphon. So here is what I was just talking about. Al plus a word that begins with a vowel becomes al instead of Allah. So, but alaxes. So this is a future form, right? We can see that with that xi there, and we know the word alato, right? Alato, we just learned that. And so we have the tau tau. When we do tau tau plus sigma, we end up with xi. So alaxes is the second person singular future active indicative. So, but you will change ton adelphon. Now this is our first second declension noun. So, ton, you can probably guess what this is. This is the masculine definite article. So, where we would see tain, that we recognize, right? Tain. This is the masculine equivalent. And then adelphon, what we're really looking for is the ending, right? To determine what declension the noun is. So we see that on ending, where otherwise we might see on, right? Alpha nu, or ain, epsilon nu. Now it's on. And now it's on. So, I don't know how I entertain myself. Okay, that is it. That ton adelphon is our first second declension noun. And adelphon is a brother. So, but you will change the brother. I know, Greek sentences, weird, right? But it's fun, and I hope that you're enjoying this. That's really all that I have to say today. And I know that future can be a little bit intimidating and hard to understand at first. So again, feel free to reach out. My contact information will be down below in the description, along with this week's lesson video, the link to From Alpha to Omega, which is the book I'm using, and also last week's lesson video if you missed that one. They're all down below. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next week. Make sure to reach out with any questions and enjoy the worksheet. Bye!